The mining ship Cerberus moved through space like a metal beast hunting for rocks to eat. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her chair on the bridge, watching the empty darkness outside. Her ship was far from any planet, far from any help. This was how she liked it. Out here in the deep black, her crew could work without anyone telling them what to do. Chen was not a pretty woman. Her face was hard, marked by years of working in space. Her hands were rough from fixing machines and fighting when she had to. The crew called her Iron Chen behind her back, but not because they were afraid. They said it because she was strong like metal, and just as hard to break. The Cerberus was not a warship. It was built to find metals and gases in space and bring them back to Earth. But like all human ships, it could fight if it needed to. The mining tools could break rocks or break enemies. The crew knew how to use both. Rodriguez, the chief engineer, was checking the ship's systems when the computers started making noise. Strange sounds came from the speakers. Not human sounds, not any sounds Chen had heard before. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "we're getting something weird on the emergency channel." Chen got up from her chair. The emergency channel was for ships in trouble. All spacefaring people used it when they were dying. She walked over to Rodriguez's station and listened. The sounds were like singing, but sad. Very sad. Like someone crying while they tried to talk. The ship's computer was trying to understand the language. Words began to appear on the screen. Children. Dying. Please. Anyone. Chen felt something cold in her stomach. She had heard distress calls before. Pirates attacking cargo ships. Engine failures in deep space. People running out of air. But this was different. This was not about machines breaking down. This was about someone hurting children. "Where is it coming from?" Chen asked. Rodriguez checked his instruments. Kepler 442 system, about 6 hours away if we push the engines hard. Chen knew that name. Every space captain knew it. Kepler 442 was marked red on all the star charts. Red meant stay away. Red meant ships went there and never came back. The government said it was too dangerous for anyone to enter. "Captain," said Walsh, the navigation officer, "that's quarantine space. We're not supposed to go there." Chen looked at the screen again. More words were appearing. "Please. They are taking the little ones. So much pain. Anyone who can hear." The voice in the transmission was getting weaker. Like someone was running out of strength to keep talking. Chen had never heard such hopelessness before. "Rodriguez, can you tell what kind of ship it is?" Rodriguez worked on his computer for a few minutes. "The signal pattern looks like Vithrak technology. You know, those plant people who make the healing medicines." Chen did know about the Vithrak. Everyone in the galaxy loved them. They were peaceful people who never hurt anyone. They traveled from planet to planet, healing the sick and teaching others how to grow food. They looked like walking trees with gentle faces and hands like flower petals. If someone was hurting Vithrak children, Chen thought, then someone very evil was in that system. The transmission kept playing. Chen could hear crying in the background now. Not just one voice, but many. Young voices. Scared voices. "Captain," Walsh said again. "Regulations say we can't enter quarantine space. We could lose our mining license. The company would fire us all." Chen looked around the bridge. Her crew was waiting for her decision. She had 10 people on this ship, 10 people who trusted her to keep them alive and keep them working. If she took them into quarantine space, some of them might die, but somewhere in that dark system, children were dying right now. "How long since we heard from any other ships out here?" Chen asked. 3 weeks, Rodriguez answered. "We're the only human ship in this sector." Chen nodded. That meant they were the only ones who could help. No military ships, no rescue vessels, just them. Just a mining ship with tools meant for breaking rocks. She thought about her own childhood on Earth. The asteroid storms that killed her parents. The refugee camps where older kids took food from younger ones. She remembered being small and scared, hoping someone would come to help. Someone had helped her. A mining crew had found her camp and brought everyone to safety. That was why she became a miner herself. That was why she learned to fight and survive in space. "Rodriguez, how are our weapons?" she asked. The mining lasers are working fine. The explosive charges, too. We've got enough to crack a small moon if we need to. And the ship? She's tough, Captain. These old mining ships were built to survive anything. Chen made her choice. The same choice she had made many times before, but never for strangers, never for aliens she had never met. Set course for Kepler 442. Full speed. Walsh stared at her. Captain, you can't be serious. That place is a ship graveyard. Nothing comes back from there. Something is killing children, Chen said. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt fire building. We don't leave children to die. Not human children, not alien children, not any children. But the regulations. Screw the regulations. Chen's voice got harder. Rodriguez, push the engines as hard as they'll go. Walsh, plot the fastest course. Everyone else, get ready for trouble. The crew looked at each other. They knew their captain was tough, but this was crazy. Going into quarantine space to help aliens they had never seen. But they also knew something else about humans. When someone was in trouble, humans helped. It did not matter if they were strangers. It did not matter if it was dangerous. Humans had been helping each other survive for thousands of years. It was what made them different from most other species in the galaxy. One by one, the crew nodded. Rodriguez started pushing more power to the engines. Walsh began calculating their course. The weapons officer started checking the mining lasers. As the Cerberus turned toward the quarantine system, Chen sat back in her chair. She could still hear the alien voices crying for help. The sound made her angry. Not just angry at whoever was hurting them, but angry at a galaxy that would mark a system as forbidden and then ignore the people dying inside it. 6 hours later, they arrived at Kepler 442. What they found there would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans. The system was dark except for one dying star, but near the fourth planet, Chen could see lights. Ship lights, and one of those ships was very big, moving very slowly, like it was broken. That's our target, Chen said. The big one, that's where the signal is coming from. As they got closer, they could see the ship more clearly. It was beautiful, made of what looked like living wood and crystal. It glowed with soft lights like a firefly, but the lights were getting dimmer, like the ship was dying. Vithrak colony ship, Rodriguez confirmed. But look at those other contacts. Chen looked at the scanner. 3 smaller ships were attached to the big one like parasites feeding on a host. These ships were ugly, made of black metal and covered in spikes. Pirates? Walsh asked. Worse, Chen said. She had heard stories about ships like these. Those are Skarn vessels. Everyone on the bridge got quiet. The Skarn were known throughout the galaxy as the worst kind of evil. They did not just steal or kill. They enjoyed causing pain. They fed on fear and suffering like other creatures fed on food. And they had a ship full of peaceful plant people who probably could not fight back. Chen felt the fire in her chest grow hotter. Battle stations. We're going in. The Cerberus moved closer to the dying Vithrak ship. Chen could see the damage now. Holes had been burned through the beautiful wooden hull. The crystal windows were cracked, but the ship was still alive, still glowing weakly like a candle in the wind. The Skarn ships haven't noticed us yet, Rodriguez whispered. Their sensors are focused on the colony ship. Chen studied the enemy vessels through the view screen. They were smaller than the Cerberus, but they looked meaner. Black metal hulls covered in weapons. No windows, just dark slits like the eyes of sharks. Can we take all 3? Chen asked her weapons officer, Martinez. Martinez had been a soldier before becoming a miner. He knew about fighting. 1 at a time, yes. All 3 at once, he shook his head. They'll tear us apart, Chen thought for a moment. The smart thing would be to call for help. Send a message to the nearest military base and wait for real warships to arrive. But that would take days, maybe weeks. The voices on the radio were getting weaker. The children would be dead long before help arrived. New plan, Chen said. We board the colony ship. Help whoever we can. Fight from there. Board a ship full of Skarn? Walsh looked at her like she was crazy. Captain Skarn don't take prisoners. They just torture people for fun and then eat them. Then we better make sure they don't catch us. Chen turned to the rest of her crew. Listen up. We're going into hell to pull out some people who don't deserve what's happening to them. Anyone who wants to stay on the ship can stay. No shame in that. But anyone who comes with me better be ready to see things that will give you nightmares. The crew looked at each other. These were tough people. They had worked in the worst parts of space, seen accidents that killed their friends, fought off pirates and claim jumpers. But they had never fought Skarn before. "I'm in," Rodriguez said. "Can't let kids suffer while I sit here safe." "Me too," Martinez added. "Someone needs to pay for what they've done." One by one, the rest of the crew volunteered. Even Walsh, who was still shaking his head, said he would come. Chen felt proud of her people. This was what made humans special. When things got bad, they stood together. The Cerberus docked with the Vithrak ship on the side away from the Skarn vessels. Chen and 9 of her crew put on spacesuits and armed themselves with mining tools. Cutting lasers, explosive charges, metal bars that could crush rock or skulls. The airlock opened and they floated into the alien ship. The first thing Chen noticed was the smell. Even through her suit's filters, she could smell death. Old death and fresh death mixed together. The second thing was the quiet. No sounds of life, no humming of machinery, just silence. They moved through corridors made of living wood. The walls were carved with beautiful patterns of leaves and flowers, but the beauty was ruined by burn marks and bloodstains. Skarn weapons had torn holes in the artwork. Dark stains covered the floor. "This way," Chen whispered, following her suit's sensors toward the life signs. They found the first body in what looked like a garden room. It had been a Vithrak, one of the tree people. But what the Skarn had done to it was so terrible that Martinez threw up inside his helmet. "Keep moving," Chen ordered. "Don't look too long." They found more bodies as they went deeper into the ship. All of them had been tortured before being killed. The Skarn had taken their time, enjoying every moment of pain they caused. Chen had seen bad things before. Space was dangerous and people died in terrible ways. But this was different. This was not an accident or even a quick murder. This was cruelty for the sake of cruelty. The life signs led them to what looked like a cargo hold. But when they opened the door, Chen saw it was not for cargo. It was a prison. The Skarn had built cages inside the room, small cages that barely had room for a person to sit. Inside the cages were the survivors, Vithrak adults and children, pressed together in spaces too small for their tree-like bodies. Their wooden skin was burned and cut. Their flower face petals were wilted with pain and fear. But they were alive. "Dear God," Rodriguez whispered. In the center of the room were 3 Skarn guards. They looked like giant insects crossed with sharks, black chitin shells covered with spikes, multiple arms ending in claws, faces that were all teeth and hunger. The guards had not seen the humans yet. They were too busy enjoying their work. One was using an electric prod to shock a Vithrak child who could not be more than 6 years old. The child was crying, making sounds like wind through dying leaves. Chen felt something break inside her chest. A wall she had built to protect herself from getting too angry, too violent. The wall crumbled and she felt the fury of her entire species flow through her. Humans had been prey once. Long ago on Earth, bigger animals had hunted them. But humans had learned to hunt back. They had become so good at hunting that they drove their predators extinct. Now looking at these creatures hurting children, Chen remembered what humans really were. She raised her cutting laser and fired. The beam went through the first Skarn's head like it was made of paper. The creature fell without making a sound. The other 2 guards spun around, shocked. They had never seen humans before. They did not know what they were looking at. "Spread out," Chen ordered. "Kill them all." The fight was short and brutal. The Skarn were strong and fast, but they were used to fighting helpless victims. They had never faced humans with proper weapons and a reason to fight. Martinez put an explosive charge on the second guard's chest and triggered it. The blast threw pieces of the creature across the room. Rodriguez used his metal bar to crush the skull of the third one. When the fighting was over, Chen looked around the room. The cages were full of terrified Vithrak. They stared at the humans like they could not believe what they had seen. Chen took off her helmet so they could see her face. "We're here to help. We heard your message." One of the adult Vithrak spoke in their musical language. The universal translator in Chen's suit turned it into words she could understand. You came for us. But you do not know us. We are not your people." "Doesn't matter," Chen said. "You needed help. We came." The Vithrak's flower face opened wider, showing surprise. "Your species. You risk yourselves for strangers." "Sometimes," Chen said. when it's the right thing to do. As her crew worked to open the cages, Chen accessed the ship's computer system. What she found there made her even angrier than the torture. The Skarn had records of other raids, other ships they had captured, other species they had tortured and killed. The Vithrak were just the latest victims in a long list of innocent people who had died screaming. But worse than that, Chen found communications with other Skarn groups. This was not just 3 ships acting alone. This was part of a bigger operation. Hundreds of Skarn vessels spread across the galaxy, hunting peaceful species like animals, and the galaxy's governments knew about it. The files showed messages from the Altarian Republic, the Centauran Alliance, even the great hegemony of worlds. They all knew what the Skarn were doing. They just did not care enough to stop it. The Vithrak were not considered important enough to save. They were just acceptable losses in a galaxy where the strong did what they wanted and the weak suffered. Rodriguez came over to Chen's side. "Captain, we've got 47 survivors. Most of them are hurt bad, but they'll live. What about the ship?" Chen looked around the beautiful vessel that had been turned into a torture chamber. How many people were on this ship originally? The eldest Vithrak, an ancient tree person with bark skin and leaves for hair, answered in a voice like rustling branches. 800 souls, young warrior. 800 of our people were traveling to a new world to plant gardens and heal the sick. 800. Chen felt sick. They had saved less than 50. "Can we get your ship moving again?" Chen asked. The elder shook his head sadly. "The Skarn broke our engines first. We are dead in space." Chen made another decision. The kind of decision that would change everything. "Then we take you with us, all of you, back to human space." "But your ship," the elder began. "We'll make room. Humans are good at making room when people need help." As they prepared to transfer the survivors to the Cerberus, Chen sent a message back to Earth, not to the government or the military, to the news networks, to every human who could receive transmissions. The message was simple. Pictures of the torture chambers. Pictures of the dead children. Pictures of creatures that thought they could hunt peaceful people without consequences. By the time the Cerberus left the Kepler-442 system, carrying its cargo of broken but living Vithrak, that message was spreading through human space like wildfire, and humans were getting angry, very angry. The news reached Earth 3 days after the Cerberus left Kepler-442. Chen's message spread across every human world, every space station, every mining colony in the outer systems. Pictures of tortured children, videos of the Skarn torture devices, the faces of the survivors looking at their rescuers with gratitude and disbelief. But the thing that made humans angriest was not what they saw. It was what they learned afterward. The galactic community had known about the Skarn for years. Every major government had files on their activities. Ships had been disappearing in certain sectors for decades. Distress calls had been ignored. Peaceful species had been marked as acceptable losses in classified reports. The Altarian Republic's response came first. A polite message saying they were concerned about the situation and would consider appropriate measures. They suggested the Vithrak should have hired better security for their colony ship. The Centauran Alliance was more direct. They said the Kepler-442 system was outside their territory, so it was not their problem. They recommended that species traveling through dangerous space should accept the risks involved. Even the powerful hegemony of worlds, the closest thing the galaxy had to a united government, offered only to monitor the situation and gather more information before taking action. To humans, these responses were not just wrong. They were evil. Admiral Marcus Webb stood before the Terran Federation Council on Mars. Behind him, holographic displays showed the evidence from the Vithrak ship. Broken bodies, torture chambers, cages built for children. "Members of the Council," Webb said, his voice steady but cold. "We have been part of this galactic community for 50 years. We have followed their laws, paid their taxes, accepted their judgment that we are a minor power, not worthy of full membership." He gestured to the horrific images. "This is what their civilization produces. This is what they call acceptable. Children tortured to death for entertainment, while governments debate and committees meet and bureaucrats file reports." Webb was a big man, even for a human. He had fought in the Titan Rebellion, where human miners had overthrown a corrupt corporate government. He had led boarding actions against pirate fleets, but now he looked tired, disgusted. "We are called Deathworlders," he continued. "They say we come from a planet so dangerous that it made us violent and primitive. They look down on us because we solve problems with our fists instead of our words." He paused, looking at each council member. "They are right about one thing. Earth tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Ice ages that should have wiped us out. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Asteroids that shattered continents. Predators that hunted us like prey. But we survived. We learned that sometimes the only answer to a predator is to become a more dangerous predator. We learned that words do not stop a lion from eating your children. We learned that committees do not save people from burning buildings." The council chamber was silent. Outside the windows, Earth hung in the sky like a blue marble. Beautiful, but marked with scars from the wars and disasters that had shaped humanity. "The galaxy thinks we are primitive because we fight," Webb said. "But they are wrong. We do not fight because we are savage. We fight because we understand what is worth fighting for." He pointed to the image of a Vithrak child, barely alive, reaching out to touch Captain Chen's hand. "We fight for them, for people who cannot fight for themselves, for children who should be playing in gardens instead of dying in cages, for the idea that some things are not acceptable no matter what the cost of stopping them." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 50 years, humanity would act without asking permission from the galactic community. The mobilization began immediately. But this was not like other wars. This was not armies marching or fleets gathering at military bases. This was an entire species deciding that something had to stop. Mining corporations retooled their equipment for war. Rock-breaking lasers became ship-killing weapons. Excavation charges became bombs powerful enough to crack moons. Ore haulers became troop transports. Research stations turned their computers toward one goal: finding every skarn in the galaxy. Scientists who had spent their lives studying stars and planets now studied torture devices and slave routes. On the frontier worlds, farmers put down their tools and picked up weapons. On the corporate stations, office workers signed up for military service. On Earth itself, old veterans came out of retirement to teach young people how to fight. The Vithrak survivors, still recovering in human hospitals, watched the news in amazement. The elder, Shiana, spoke to a reporter through tears. "In all our travels," she said, "we have met many species. Some are kind, some are cruel, most are simply indifferent. But we have never seen anything like this. An entire people choosing to go to war for strangers they have never met." The reporter asked why she thought humans were different. "Most species evolve on worlds that are safe," Shiana explained. "Their planets protect them, feed them, keep them comfortable. So they learn to avoid conflict, to find peaceful solutions, to believe that violence is always wrong. But humans..." She paused, trying to find the right words. "Humans come from a world that wanted to kill them. They learned that sometimes violence is the only thing that stops worse violence. They learned that refusing to fight does not make you moral, it just makes you a victim." The galactic community watched the human mobilization with growing alarm. This was not supposed to happen. Minor powers did not start wars. They filed complaints and waited for their betters to handle things. The Altarian Republic sent a diplomatic message to Earth, demanding that humans stop their aggressive actions and respect established protocols for dealing with criminal elements. Admiral Webb's response was broadcast across the galaxy. "Your protocols are why children died screaming. Your protocols are why monsters like the Skarn exist. We reject your protocols." The Centauran Alliance threatened economic sanctions. Human trade was worth billions of credits to their corporations. The human response was simple: sanction us. We do not need to trade with people who think torture is acceptable. Even the hegemony of worlds, the most powerful government in the galaxy, tried to order humanity to stand down. They sent a fleet to the edge of human space as a show of force. The humans ignored them completely, because humanity had learned something from their violent history that the rest of the galaxy never had to learn. When someone you love is in danger, nothing else matters. Not laws, not treaties. Not the opinions of people who think they are better than you. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they said, "Never again." 3 weeks after the rescue of the Vithrak survivors, the first human battle groups left Sol system. They were not heading for Skarn military targets or government centers. They were heading for every place where innocent people were being hurt. every slave market that sold Skarn victims, every black market dealer who provided torture equipment, every corrupt official who looked the other way when ships disappeared. The galaxy had taught humans an important lesson about civilized behavior. Now humans were going to teach the galaxy an important lesson about consequences. In the deep space between stars, Skarn hunting parties received reports of human ships approaching. They laughed. Humans were just Deathworld primitives with simple weapons and no understanding of proper warfare. They would learn how wrong they were. But first, they would learn why the galaxy called Earth a Deathworld. It was not because the planet was dangerous. It was because of what it had created. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the battleship Vengeful, looking out at the fleet spreading across space around him. Hundreds of ships all heading toward the same goal. "Status report," he ordered. "All battle groups are in position, sir. Mining ships, cargo haulers, research vessels, everything we could arm and armor. Even some civilian ships volunteered to help with rescue operations." Webb nodded. "And the Skarn?" "Still hunting, sir. Still torturing. Still thinking they can do whatever they want to, peaceful people." Webb allowed himself a small, cold smile. "Then let's go teach them about consequences." The human fleet moved deeper into the dark, carrying with them the fury of an entire species that had finally decided to stop being polite. The first Skarn hunting party thought they had found easy prey when they spotted the human cargo convoy near the Rigel system. 5 ships traveling together, moving slowly, heavy with valuable metals from the asteroid mines. Commander Vexthul licked his razor teeth as he studied the scanner readings. Humans were new to this part of space. They probably did not even know about the Skarn yet. This would be fun. "Deploy hunting formation," he ordered his 3 ships. "Disable their engines, but do not destroy them. I want to see how long these Deathworlders take to break." The Skarn had heard stories about humans, violent primitives from a dangerous planet, but they had never fought them before. They assumed humans would be like all the other species they hunted. Weak, frightened, easy to break. They were about to learn why humans were different. The convoy did not try to run when the Skarn ships approached. Instead, something impossible happened. The cargo ships opened like flowers, revealing weapons that should not exist on civilian vessels. Mining lasers meant for cutting asteroids turned toward the Skarn ships. These were not military-grade weapons, but they did not need to be. They were designed to crack rocks the size of mountains. Skarn armor might as well have been paper. The first raider exploded before Vexthul could even give orders to fire back. The second ship lasted long enough to get off one shot before a human mining charge blew it in half. Vexthul's own ship was crippled by a tool meant for moving 1,000-ton boulders. As his vessel tumbled helplessly through space, he watched human ships dock with his hull. Boarding parties were coming. The humans who entered his ship were not soldiers. They were miners, engineers, cargo handlers, common workers who should have been easy to intimidate. But they moved through his ship like they owned it, clearing room by room with efficient violence. When they found Vexthul hiding in his command center, he expected them to torture him for information. That was what civilized species did when they captured enemies. They would hurt him until he told them what they wanted to know. Instead, the human leader simply shot him in the head and moved on to check the ship's computer files. The Skarn had always believed that cruelty made them superior. They thought other species were weak because they showed mercy. But humans had shown them something worse than cruelty: indifference. To humans, Skarn were not enemies worth hating. They were just vermin to be exterminated. News of the convoy attack spread through Skarn space like poison in the water. 1 hunting party destroyed by civilian ships? It had to be a mistake, a lucky shot, bad intelligence about human capabilities. But then it happened again. And again. And again. Every Skarn raider that encountered humans discovered the same thing. There was no difference between human military and civilian vessels. Every ship could fight. Every person was a potential warrior. The galaxy's neat categories of combatant and non-combatant meant nothing to a species that had learned to survive by making every person a weapon. Admiral Webb watched the reports come in from his flagship. Battle groups were hitting Skarn installations across 3 sectors simultaneously. But these were not normal military targets. Humans did not care about conquering territory or capturing resources. They cared about saving people. "Status on Operation Shepherd," Webb ordered. "All rescue groups are in position, sir." We've identified 47 facilities where the Skarn are holding prisoners. Mining stations, research outposts, even some luxury ships where they keep victims for entertainment. Webb nodded. This was the real battle. Not ship-to-ship combat, but the race to save innocent lives before their captors could kill them out of spite. Launch all operations simultaneously. I want every prisoner free before the Skarn can organize a response. Across the sector, human ships appeared at Skarn facilities like angels of vengeance. But these angels carried mining equipment instead of harps. At the Theta 7 mining station, Captain Rodriguez led a boarding party through corridors filled with the screams of tortured prisoners. The Skarn had built their facility around a captured passenger liner, using the ship's hull as the framework for their torture chambers. Rodriguez had seen the intelligence reports. He knew what to expect, but seeing it was different. The Skarn had turned the passenger dining room into an arena where they forced prisoners to fight each other for entertainment. The luxury cabins had become cells where victims were kept in constant pain. The ship's theater had been converted into an operating room where Skarn doctors practiced their experiments on living beings. Charges placed. Captain, reported Sergeant Kim, we can bring down the whole station in 10 minutes. Not until every prisoner is out, Rodriguez said. Every single one. The rescue operation took 6 hours. Humans fought room by room through a station designed to cause maximum suffering. They lost 12 people getting the prisoners out. But they saved over 300 beings from a dozen different species. As the last transport lifted off, Rodriguez triggered the charges himself. The Theta 7 station became a brief star in the darkness, taking with it all the torture devices and holding cells that had caused so much pain. But the humans were not just destroying Skarn military targets. They were dismantling the entire network that made Skarn operations possible. Captain Martinez led a strike force against the Nexus trading post, a supposedly neutral station that served as a black market for Skarn raids. The station's manager, a corrupt Altarian named Felcott, had been selling information about passenger routes to Skarn hunting parties for years. When the human ships arrived, Felcott tried to claim diplomatic immunity. This is a violation of interstellar law, he protested as human soldiers arrested his security forces. I am a citizen of the Altarian Republic. You cannot touch me. Martinez looked at the records they had found, lists of ships, passenger manifests, payment receipts for information that had led to hundreds of deaths. You sold children to monsters, Martinez said quietly. Law does not protect people like you anymore. Felcott was shipped back to human space in chains. His station was converted into a refugee center for Skarn victims. The galactic community watched in horror as humans systematically destroyed not just Skarn ships, but the entire infrastructure that supported them. Banks that laundered their profits found their accounts frozen, and their managers arrested. Corporations that sold them supplies discovered their factories under human occupation. Government officials who had taken bribes to look the other way were dragged from their offices and put on trial. This is chaos, declared Prime Minister Vashitar of the Centauran Alliance. Humans cannot simply ignore galactic law whenever they disagree with it. The human response came from Admiral Webb himself, broadcast on every news channel in known space. Your laws protect the people who hurt children. Your laws make it illegal to save innocent lives without proper paperwork. Your laws treat torture as a business dispute. We reject your laws. But this will lead to anarchy, Vashitar protested. If every species decides to ignore established authority, then maybe, Webb interrupted, established authority should have done its job. The Skarn hegemony finally realized that humans were not just angry. They were systematically destroying everything the Skarn had built over centuries of raiding and torture. War leader Krakthus gathered the surviving Skarn fleets for one massive counterattack. If they could destroy the human fleet, they could return to hunting helpless prey in peace. But when the Skarn armada arrived at the rendezvous point, they found something that broke their understanding of how war worked. The humans were not just waiting for them. They had brought their victims with them. Dozens of ships carried the survivors of Skarn raids. Vithrak refugees, rescued Bellan merchants, freed Kefri scientists. All the species that the Skarn had tortured and enslaved over the years. But these victims were not helpless anymore. They had been armed and trained by humans. They flew alongside human ships as allies, not passengers. Krakthus could not understand it. Why do they fight for strangers? What do they gain from protecting weaklings? His intelligence officer, studying the human fleet composition, gave him an answer that chilled his blood. War leader, the humans are not fighting for gain. They are fighting because they think it is right. Every ship out there contains people who volunteered to die for beings they have never met. Krakthus had faced many enemies in his long career. Pirates fighting for treasure, governments fighting for territory, corporations fighting for profit. But he had never faced an entire species fighting for an idea. The idea that some things were worth dying for. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Skarn hegemony no longer existed as a military force. Their ships were scrap metal floating in space. Their leaders were dead or captured, but the real victory was not the destruction of the Skarn fleet. It was what happened afterward. As human ships moved through the wreckage, they were not looking for salvage or prisoners. They were looking for slave holds, torture chambers, any place where victims might still be alive. They found over 1,000 prisoners in the wreckage of Skarn ships, beings who had been written off as dead by their own governments, saved by humans who refused to give up on anyone. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as human rescue teams worked for days to save every life they could find, even as radiation from the destroyed ships made the work deadly. This was not how civilized species made. 6 months after the first distress signal from the Vithrak ship, Admiral Webb stood in the ruins of the Skarn capital world. The planet Krathmore had once been the center of an empire built on pain and terror. Now it was silent. The Skarn had tried to make their last stand here, using their own civilians as shields. But humans had learned long ago how to fight in cities without harming innocent people. Street by street, building by building, they had cleared out the Skarn military while protecting everyone else. Final count. Admiral, reported Captain Chen, who had been promoted after her rescue of the Vithrak. We've shut down the last Skarn military installation. Their government has surrendered unconditionally. Webb nodded as he looked out over the city. Skarn civilians moved through the streets, staring at their human occupiers with a mixture of fear and confusion. They had never seen conquerors who handed out food instead of chains. What's the status on the war crimes tribunals? All major Skarn leaders are in custody. We've documented over 10,000 individual cases of torture, murder, and enslavement. The evidence files alone fill 3 databanks. Webb had insisted on proper trials, even for monsters like the Skarn leadership. Some of his officers had argued for simple execution, but humans had learned the importance of justice over revenge. And the prisoners? All the people they were holding? Every single one has been freed, sir. 14,000 beings from 47 different species. Most are on their way home. The ones who don't have homes anymore are being resettled in human space. That was the number that made Webb proud. Not the ships destroyed or enemies killed, but the lives saved. 14,000 people who would go home to their families instead of dying in Skarn torture chambers. There's something else, sir, Chen continued. The galactic governments are requesting a meeting. They want to discuss the new situation. Webb almost smiled. The new situation? That was their diplomatic way of saying that humans had just rewritten the rules of galactic civilization. The meeting took place on the neutral station Harmony Point, in the center of the galaxy. Representatives from every major government attended: the Altarian Republic, the Centauran Alliance, the Hegemony of Worlds, and dozens of smaller powers. They all wanted to know the same thing. What did humans want? The war is over, declared Chancellor Vexon of the Hegemony. The Skarn threat has been eliminated. Surely now we can return to normal diplomatic relations. Admiral Webb sat at the human delegation table, still wearing his military uniform. Around him, the alien diplomats wore their finest clothes and most expensive jewelry. They looked like they were attending a celebration, not discussing the aftermath of a war. Normal diplomatic relations, Webb repeated. You mean the kind where you ignore distress calls from dying children because it might be inconvenient to help them? Chancellor Vexon shifted uncomfortably. The Skarn situation was regrettable, but we must understand that galactic stability requires 14,000 people, Webb interrupted. That's how many prisoners we freed from Skarn facilities. 14,000 beings who your governments wrote off as acceptable losses. Prime Minister Kethra of the Altarian Republic leaned forward. Admiral, surely you understand that we cannot police every criminal organization in the galaxy. Resources are limited. Priorities must be set. You had the resources to build luxury space stations for your politicians, Webb said coldly. You had the resources to fund art museums and sporting events. You just did not have the resources to save children from torture chambers. The room fell silent. Every government represented here had known about the Scarn for years. They had all chosen to do nothing. What do you want from us? Chancellor Vexen asked finally. Webb stood up and activated a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy, but not the political borders these diplomats were used to seeing. Instead, it showed something new. Safe zones marked in blue, danger zones marked in red, and patrol routes marked in gold. This is the new reality, Webb said. Humans will establish protection zones around every peaceful species in the galaxy. Any predator that enters these zones will be destroyed. Any government that supports them will be treated as an enemy. You cannot simply declare jurisdiction over half the galaxy, protested Ambassador Feltar of the Centauran Alliance. Your international law forbids torture too, Webb pointed out. But you did not seem interested in enforcing that part. He gestured to the map again. This is not a negotiation. This is an announcement. We are telling you what we will do, not asking for permission. Chancellor Vexen tried to maintain his diplomatic composure. Admiral, while we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm for justice, the established order cannot simply be, the established order is dead, Webb said flatly. You killed it when you decided that some people's lives do not matter. We are creating a new order, one where hurting innocent people has consequences. The meeting continued for hours, but the real discussion was over. The old galactic civilization had been built on the idea that stability was more important than justice. The new one would be built on the opposite principle. 3 months later, Elder Shiana of the Vithrak stood in a garden on the human colony world of New Eden. Around her, Vithrak children played among the flowers, their laughter like wind chimes in the breeze. These were some of the survivors from the peaceful dawn, the colony ship that had sent the desperate distress call. They had been given land here to rebuild their lives, far from the memories of what they had suffered. A human reporter had come to interview Shiana about the changes in the galaxy since the Scarn War. She asked why the Vithrak had chosen to settle in human space instead of returning to their homeworld. Our homeworld is beautiful, Shiana explained, her flower face turning toward the playing children. But it is far from here and the journey is dangerous. Pirates and slavers still roam the space lanes looking for easy prey. But here we are safe, not because humans are strong, though they are, not because their weapons are powerful, though they are. We are safe because humans have decided that we matter. The reporter asked what she meant. Shiana gestured to a group of human children playing alongside the young Vithrak. Look at them. Human children and our children, playing together as if there is no difference between them. To humans, there is no difference. Life is life. Innocence is innocence. Children are children. Most species in the galaxy see others as alien, foreign, not their responsibility. But humans... She paused, searching for the right words. Humans see others as people, and they believe that all people deserve protection. The changes in the galaxy were becoming obvious to everyone. Species that had hidden in fear for generations were emerging from their shells. Trade routes that had been abandoned due to piracy were reopening under human protection. But the most important change was in how species thought about each other. The old galactic civilization had been built on indifference. Species minded their own business, ignored each other's problems, and only helped when it benefited them. The new civilization was different. It was built on the radical human idea that everyone's problems were everyone's problems. On the bridge of the patrol ship Guardian, Captain Rodriguez received another distress call. This one came from the Epsilon sector, where a group of Bellan refugees had been attacked by pirates. Set course for Epsilon, Rodriguez ordered. Maximum speed, his navigator looked puzzled. Sir, the Bellans are not part of our protection agreement. They're not even allied with us. Rodriguez gave him the look that every human understood, the look that said some questions did not need to be asked. They're in trouble, Rodriguez said simply. That's all we need to know. As the Guardian raced through hyperspace toward another rescue, other human ships were doing the same thing across the galaxy. Responding to distress calls, hunting pirates, protecting the innocent. The galaxy had learned something important about humans during the Scarn War. They were not just good at fighting. They were good at caring, and in a universe full of species that had forgotten how to care about strangers, that made all the difference. Admiral Webb stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching human patrol ships move through the nearby space lanes. Each ship carried a crew of volunteers who had chosen to spend their lives protecting people they would never meet. A young reporter approached him, the same one who had interviewed Elder Shiana. She wanted to know what humans had gained from their war against the Skarn. Gained? Webb thought about the question. We lost 1,200 good people in that war. We spent half our treasury on weapons and ships. We made enemies of governments that used to be neutral. But, he continued, looking out at the stars, we gained something too. We proved that doing the right thing is not impossible. It just requires someone willing to pay the price. The reporter asked if he thought the galaxy was safer now. Webb smiled, the first real smile he had shown in months. Ask me in a few years. Right now, there are probably a dozen new threats out there that we have not discovered yet. Pirates, slavers, monsters who think they can hurt innocent people without consequences. But they're wrong, because humans are listening. We're always listening. And when we hear someone calling for help,